So officially, just make sure I'm connected. Just going to do some quick announcements. And I just want to first thank anybody who's joining us by live stream, welcome. If you want to join our prayer meeting in the afternoon, come to Killarney, Ireland, and join us. We'd love to have you. But the message is only being audio streamed, not the prayer time. So just those that know locally, but if you're joining us, that's the only way you can join us, is come join us in person. So let's see, just some quick announcements. I just always keep mentioning our upcoming meetings, which our little list is getting fewer and fewer. But we've got our next month's meetings, June 24, July 26, August 26, and then our special one is Feast of Trumpets, which we're going to be having Jill Shannon from Israel. She's a Messianic Jew. And I told her this time I promised to do a better job of, my brain couldn't think, and I'm not so sure I can think too much better right now either, with that regard. But she's a Messianic Jewish Bible teacher, author, singer, and songwriter. And she speaks and writes about experiencing God's glory, holy living, and intimate friendship with the Lord, the biblical feast, Israel, the church, and the end times. She's just a packed pistol in every way possible. Just a real blessing that you really wouldn't want to miss. Like I said, I think last time, you might want to miss me, but you will not want to miss her. So she's precious, and she's going to come minister to the Irish bride. And when I say the Irish bride, who's ever living in this nation, so if you're a different nationality, if this is your home, this is where you're, the bride of Ireland might be a better way to put it. But, we're a melting pot in some ways here too. So, but she's going to come minister to the bride of Ireland, I'll say that, in September. So that's September 20th. That meeting is different. It's in the evening. It's also on a Wednesday. So we have flyers that we just got completed, and the information, she's got one. So nice. That's the updated information, and it's Wednesday evening. It starts at 6 promptly. It's not a Saturday meeting. It's the only one. It will start on the Lord's Feast. Not that I'm going to just say that. If anybody cares to donate, the offering box is there at the thing, and that's all I'm going to say on that. There's also, and I think Sharon already knows this, so it is the few of us here today, but the table's there with our ministry materials. But if anybody's listening who's not able to join us, if you do, there's ministry materials there. The ministry is a prayer ministry. We're called to this nation to pray and to help prepare the bride of Christ here in this nation, and to help raise up prayer. The last thing that I'm probably going to mention is just, sure, you weren't here last time, so it doesn't apply to you, but if anybody is listening or knows last time, we will have tea and coffee again after. It'll be downstairs. Last time we had a internal miscommunication with the hotel. It wasn't between us, but it was their own internal thing. So I didn't find out there was no tea and coffee until it was after the fact, and it was too late. So I just wanted to apologize to anybody who, I made the announcement, we're having tea and coffee, and there was no tea and coffee. And I felt bad. So I just apologize officially on the record, and I'm sorry, but we hopefully got that little hiccup sorted out. So I think that's it for announcements. Christine, am I forgetting anything?
It was just that's turned on. That's turned on.
Yes. Yeah. No, that's fine. That's right.
That's 2 things.
They're turned on. I'm just looking at and seeing if I'm missing anything before we just go right into the Word, because I always have a lot to share. I'm not. No, but good question. Short answer is no. That's okay. So, a lot to share, and the Lord plans these meetings. They're not my idea. And as I keep encouraging people to come, to join us however that is, whether it's in person, whether it's live streaming, whether it's the recordings after the fact. I've always just keep in the Lord's building upon each meeting, and He's doing an eternal work in each one, and He's purposed to meet with everyone who comes, and I believe He also is going to meet with anybody who listens to it, whether they're joining us live stream or after the fact too, because He wanted them recorded and He wanted them live stream. So I don't question His ways, I just say yes, Lord. So I just want to keep encouraging. The messages are going to keep building upon each other, and I can now we've done a couple, and this is our third meeting now. He's just the master builder. And so today's message is called Preparing the Overcomers, the Robe of Humility and Meekness. And I just want to say that we're jumping right into that message. I'm not going to recap the month before, but last month we talked a lot about, we looked at Haggai. We started out with Haggai chapter 2, verses 6 through 7, and Hebrews 12, and 26 and 27. And just about the shakings that are coming. Just to recap what we looked at last month, the shakings that are coming, and that Yeshua spoke about in Matthew 24. Talks about all the nations are going to be shook. The earthquakes, things we haven't seen take place. He talks about the great tribulation that's coming, verses 21 through 22. But what in our message last month, he really wanted to talk about obedience, but the shakings are important because he's trying to shake the people first to get them ready before everything starts shaking. That the only thing left standing is going to be that which cannot be shook. So he's trying to shake us and get a people to respond. And because he's only going to take a people, he's going to be carriers of the Lord that are completely empty of themselves, which they will not walk in compromise, no mixture. They'll be vessels who've made themselves ready. What these meetings are, the meetings are preparing the overcomers. And he gets to decide what that looks like for us. And so, can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay. Just want to make sure, not just talking to myself. So he gets to decide what that looks like, but we talked about, he wants to make a habitation with us. He's not looking just to dwell among us, he's looking to dwell among us and to habitate within us. But he can't unless the vessel's prepared. And so we were talking more about that. And it's not going to be everyone, but only those who say yes to the wedding invite, which is the call to die to self, which is the call to live the crucified life that we looked in the first meeting. And I'll keep bringing up the wedding invite because it's about a bride who's made herself ready for her wedding day. So, and ultimately he's after until Christ is completely conformed within us. You'll hear me say that over and over often. And that's his end result of what he's getting us to get to that empty, that we're conformed to his likeness and image. That we can be those vessels that can be of noble use to him. And in that process, that's how he qualifies us to be the bride, the overcomer, which is interchangeable. And I'm going to say, because I had this conversation during the week with someone, and they said, oh, you've got to let them know that the bride, because people think the bride is just, it's female. And I said, well, I do. Come, listen to the messages. Every time I try to make a point of saying, it's not gender-based. Bride, overcomer, sons of God, all pretty much interchangeable. Speak of spiritual maturity. Someone just keeps saying that because it can be a new message for some people. And we don't want the men to think that they're excluded, because absolutely not, any more than we would want women to think they're excluded when we speak of sons of God. It's purely spiritual maturity, and it's the highest level. So, we looked greatly in detail, we looked in detail at our obedience and how it's a key for us in this process of dying, and will help prepare us for the dark days. That is a key. That if we don't learn how to hear the voice of the Lord now, while things are relatively okay, and I mean relatively okay, I know things are pretty dark right now, but we haven't seen the banks crash. We haven't seen masses with no work. We haven't seen all mayhem break out. So if we don't learn to embrace these times and get rid of all our busyness, all our distractions, we have to be intentional if we want to be the bride. Every day, every breath we breathe. Have to be intentional. So the good news is there's time, But we were looking at our obedience, because obedience is going to be key. And we are in the last days. If you don't have a premature death, I believe you will be living through the tribulation with the rest of the church. You'll keep hearing me say, church, we're going through the tribulation. There's no scripture for pre-trib. But if you don't know the voice of the Lord, and more importantly, if you don't know how to obey the voice of the Lord now, when things are relatively good, you're not going to have a hope of obeying the voice of the Lord when the shakings are happening all around you. Fear is going to set in. You're going to be looking at the natural. And you're going to react instead of step back and respond. And those people who prepared themselves will not respond like the masses. They won't be terrified. They're going to be used mightily in that day to help bring in his harvest. So we looked at that we must learn to clothe ourselves in absolute and explicit obedience, as it will literally be life and death for us. And we talked about, again, briefly, it is life and death to us today. The wages of sin are death. Most people's spiritual eyes are just not open, so they don't see, every time they sin, they don't see all the death that they're just bringing into their soul. They're destroying their soul without even realizing it. So, but even more so, it is life and death to us, our obedience. And so we further saw to qualify to be an overcomer, you need to also be found to be doing the will of God. We looked Matthew chapter 24, verses 45, 46, and 47 talks about the faithful servant and to be found faithful. That means be found on this earth. And it was only the faithful one that he was going to hand over to take care of all of his possessions. And so you have to obey. If you obey, you're going to be faithful. And if you're hearing the voice of the Lord, you're going to be in the will of God because you're hearing correctly and you're doing. But the challenge is most in the church are. Their souls are not renewed. And the soul's the part that is the hang up. And we're going to get into the renewal of the mind coming up in these meetings. We have to. I've had somebody ask me
Nobody else is.
Well, and someone asked me that. They said, well, yeah, they're looking, well, how do we do what you're talking about? We're going to get there. But I'm going with the Lord. And I can see now when this is a big key that he's giving us today. You know, the first step was to lay the foundation. Got to know what the vision is. Second, now he wants obedience, because really that's the first step of our walk. Just obey. Whether you understand it or not, the understanding will come. And so his bride, the overcomers, they will obey. And so, but it's important that we need to realize not only that we have to be found doing the will of God, but we need to be eager to be found without spot or wrinkle that 2 Peter talked about in chapter 3, verse 14. Talks about in what day the Lord will come suddenly, in the verses before that. And it says, be eager to find yourself without spot or blemish. You know, so again, there's that be found that's on this earth today at his coming. And so that's an awakening that needs to take place in his body at large. And so that was just a recap of what we talked about. The audios are on the website. We have the ministry YouTube channel, which I couldn't tell you what the codes are, but I just know it's the voice of my beloved ministry. If you search it, but the messages are there. They're also on the website if anybody wants to go back and listen to them. So you can take a look at that. And today now, if you brought your Bibles with you, I'm going to ask if we can just turn and take a look at it and read Isaiah chapter 57, verse 15 together, if that's okay. Isaiah chapter 57, verse 15. And it says, for thus says the high and lofty one, he who inhabits eternity, whose name is holy. I dwell in the high and holy place, but with him also who is of a thoroughly penitent and humble heart, to revive the spirit of the humble, and to revive the heart of the thoroughly penitent, bruised with sorrow for sin. Amen. So this verse gives us a key. It's a really incredible verse of promise and hope to think that the one who's high and lofty, who inhabits eternity, whose name is holy, chooses to dwell in us. You know, we're flesh. We're dust. We're dirt. You know, our best righteousness are dirty rags to him. So there's an incredible promise in this. And it shows right there that he wants to dwell in us, but there's a qualification there. Everything's not automatic, of a humble spirit. So I've shared the 3 different attributes that I really believe the Lord has given me about. Really, if you have these 3, I really believe, and I know there's other things, but if you're humble, if you're teachable, if you obey the voice of the Lord. I mean, obey the voice of the Lord, not your soul. That's a process of dying.
That's true.
Most people think they're obeying the voice of the Lord. I'm going to qualify that. So that's a process. That's a relationship. It takes time. God can do anything with those vessels. If you're humble, if you're teachable, if you obey. And so I just want to, and we looked at the humbleness, I'm sorry about that. We looked at obedience last time. And so today I want to share on humility and meekness. Go more into that. And again, I started out a little bit just earlier saying obedience is our first step to becoming humble. And really, the more obedient you are, if you really are walking in obedience, you will by default become humble. They go hand, all the 3, humble, teachable, obeying, are interchangeable. They're working tangibly together. They have to be. But really, most people, we defined obedience last time, and we looked at a definition of that. And one of it is just that we obey, even though we haven't necessarily changed our opinion of what we're doing, we're just obeying authority. We may not still agree with it, we may not agree with the change, we may not think, but we just obey. And that's kind of what a lot of big believers need to do, because too often we want to finite reason things away. And then after you obey, take that step, then the understanding comes. Then you look back and you go, oh, and then your will comes into alignment with the King of Kings will, where before, if you're trying to, you're going to be in this conflict the whole time. So I just encourage people often, just obey. Learn to be quick to obey. Don't look at your finances. Don't look at your natural circumstances. You'll never fulfill your destiny if you're going to do those things. I can tell you that. It's just not the way God does things. He's proving our hearts. He's ultimately wanting us to learn to trust Him completely for everything. And so that's a process. But without humility and meekness, we'll not learn the discipline of dressing ourselves in it, which we need to. It's another garment to be prepared for our wedding day. If we're not humble, we will not be teachable, and we won't also be able to receive correction. Our pride will stop us in our tracks every time. We won't be able to, and we all need correction. We all need it. And if we're not willing to, then we'll miss out going into the deeper things of God. And God's after every heart to go all the way. And you often hear me say, we get to decide. That's the good news. For James 1:21 says, get rid of all wickedness and in a humble spirit receive the word of God that has the power to save your soul. We looked at that again. It's one of my favorite scriptures too. But right there is the process. Is get rid of, obey, with a humble spirit, humble yourselves, that you can receive the word of God that can save your soul. So be teachable. So in that one verse, it's just that principle, spiritual principle, those three, I'm telling you, if you get those 3, I'm not saying they're everything, but everything else will fall into place. And so, Proverbs 29:1 says, on the flip side, it says, he who is often rebuked and hardens his neck will suddenly be destroyed, and that without remedy. He who is often rebuked and hardens his neck will suddenly be destroyed, and that without remedy. That's what happens to an unteachable spirit. I really encourage us to keep asking to be teachable. Every day. Just pretty much every day I always ask the Lord, Lord, put a teachable spirit within me. Put a spirit of obedience. None of us know it all.
No.
We'll get into trouble if we ever do, but we need to stay teachable. It's a key. It's a key. And I also want to just turn and look at Colossians chapter 3, verses, I think just 12 through 13. We might look at a couple more, but if we could just take a look at those scriptures real quick. And I'm reading from the Amplified.
What number, Tracy?
It's chapter 3,
Yeah.
verses 12 through 13. And it says, "Clothe yourself, therefore, as God's own chosen ones, who are purified and holy and well beloved by God himself, by putting on behavior marked by tender-hearted pity and mercy, kind feeling, a lowly opinion of yourselves, gentle ways, and patience, which is tireless and long-suffering, and has the power to endure whatever comes with good temper. Be gentle and forbearing with one another, and if one has a difference, a grievance or complaint against another, readily pardon each other, even as the Lord has forgiven you, so must you also forgive." I'm going to read verse 14 too, because ultimately this is his goal in us. It says, "And above all these, put on love with the bond of perfectedness." Because ultimately the Lord is after perfecting us in love. And that's the selfless love of becoming conformed to Christ's image, which is what his goal is for every believer. It should be our number one priority to have that and pursuing that with intent. I think the King James Version says a little bit differently. It says, "Put on tender mercies, kindness, humility, meekness, long-suffering. Bear and forgive one another." And Ephesians chapter 4, verses 1 through 2 say very similar things too. Paul talks about clothing yourself. And 1 Peter chapter 5, verse 5, and I'm going to go through a lot of things quickly because I have a lot to cover. It seems like always, but feel free. I'm just going to read what it says. 1 Peter 5 says, "Be submissive to one another and be clothed with humility. For God resists the proud, but gives grace to the humble." And we talked about this verse just briefly in an overview last month, was "He leads the humble one is right, and the humble he teaches his way." Two different things going on there. The first part is he leads is by instruction, so be teachable.
Yeah.
He's going to first tell us his word, and then he teaches his way is by experience. So we first have to be taught, and the only way we're ever going to get to know the living God is to have a personal experience with him. It's what changes us and enlarges our spirit and causes us to transform when we have revelation with him by experience. Yeshua also tells us that in Matthew chapter 5, verses 5, that it's the meek who will inherit the earth. Psalms 37:11 says the same thing. And notice it says, will inherit the earth.
Yeah.
Because when do we normally get an inheritance? Right. When we die. Right. The meek will inherit the earth. I see that as referring to the millennium reign.
Yeah.
Because you receive an inheritance after you've died, and it's also after you've died to self. So, remember again, we talked about Matthew 24, verses 45 through 47. "It is the faithful servant found doing what his master has, who will rule over all his goods." That's why I refer back to inherits the earth, because it's in Revelation chapter 2, verses 26 and 27 that speaks about he who overcomes and who keeps my commandments to the end. I will give authority over the nations to rule with a rod of iron. So we can see there, again, he who overcomes, who obeys to the end. So we have to endure. Then he's going to give them the authority to rule over the nations. And so Matthew, I shared last time, Matthew 24, 45, those scriptures are referring to the millennium. and Revelations. So I'm going to define humility, I'm going to define meekness to help us out. I do these little studies. I just look up different things on the internet, dictionaries. I did this some time ago. This is actually pulling from the wells of treasures, I guess. The Lord wanted to talk about humility and meekness. But humility, one way to define it is lowly, submissive, showing that you do not think of yourself as better than other people. Modest. I think we probably all have good head knowledge of what that should be, right? And meekness, I think the general terms, we think of gentleness. It's also a form of humility, but it's, forbearing with one another, patient with one another. A gentleness. Here's another great definition I heard, and I can't take any credit for it, but I heard it in one of the GOEs, I believe from Nita Johnson. I think it was one of the GOEs. But years ago, actually it was in one that I went to, and she defined meekness, and I've never forgotten this, strength under control. And the example she gave was, think of a wild horse running in the fields. Beautiful to see. Brings your eye pleasure if you like horses and beauty and outdoor, but useless to man. What good is that beautiful horse running and galloping around? Put a bridle on the horse now. Now the horse has become of use to man. Strength under control. Easier said than done when we're getting tested and tried, and our pride is screaming to defend, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
It's the truth. You're a liar if it hasn't happened to you. So I really appreciate it. Strength under control. And so kingdom authority is clothed in both in humility and meekness. And they're also very powerful weapons of warfare that most would not think of them. But, and I may share a little bit more on that later as I go, but I want to go through some things. And I'm back in August of 2010, the Lord had come to me and he had given me my invite. And I'm not going to share that part of it right now. But about a week later, and that's when he told me what the call of my life was, the Lord appeared, came. It's after intense, part of things that are on the website about my testimony that I've shared. After an intense time of purification, and almost about a year to the date of that process, the Lord came. And that's when he spoke to me and gave me my call. And I wept and I wept and I wept, thinking, me of all people, little Miss Blackheart here, that you've just been putting through the most purifying process for the past almost year. I thought, how could you possibly use me? You've been showing me my stinking rotten heart for about the past year, and it's been ugly. And it was painful. Thank God for it. But so I was stunned, actually. And so almost about a week later, the Lord came again. And my prayer time came. I didn't know what to do with what he told me the week before. This was all new to me, okay? So, but he's so gracious. And he came and he said to me, I have something to share with you, my daughter. And I said, yes, Lord. He said that I was to walk really low before him, always humbly. This is a key to teaching my people what it means to be pure. That's the call on my life. How he wants to use it is up to him. Isn't he the master builder?
Yes.
Now, I couldn't appreciate that as much as I can appreciate it today. But he was saying, do what I'm asking you. And this isn't just me, it's anybody. You've got to walk in humbleness. So it's a process. I'm not there yet. I still have pride. I'm still aware of it. I think we're deceived if we think we don't. It's so hidden and it's buried in so many things, but I'm repenting of it every day. Lord, forgive me. Every way I've exalted myself above man, above you. Every way I've judged, Lord, forgive me. I'm quick to obey and I'm quick to repent. I don't want it. It's horrible. It stops us. So He gave me that key. And I didn't really know what all that meant in my life and what that was going to do, but that was 2010. It was actually almost 7 years ago. So did you know that there's a difference between humility and meekness? You shake your head, yes. I didn't. At the time, I knew that they were in the Word. My understanding was they were just both humble.
Yeah, that's what
But it bothers me. I mean, I would come across like the verse more so in Matthew 5:5 or the Psalms 37:11. The meek shall inherit it. It didn't say the humble shall inherit the earth. So there was a difference. So it bothered me enough to know that there was a difference, but I didn't really understand what the difference was. And I just thought they both were interchangeable in one way. And so over time, and I'm not sure exactly when I started asking that because, well, that was in 2010, the Lord gave me that. Well, it was pretty soon after that. He spoke to me about humbleness. And so both are character attributes that cause us to be transformed into His likeness, conformed to Christ. Both greatly affect our relationship with Him and with others. And they will determine to what degree we will fulfill the call that is on our lives and our destiny. Our prayer closet is a key to helping us learn how to be humble and meek. I share often, I said, the more time we spend in prayer, having that intimate time of fellowship with the Lord, it's almost impossible not to become humble and meek. If you're really seeking the heart of God, to know Him, as Jeremiah says in verse 29:13, that when we seek Him with our whole heart, then we'll find Him. That's the heart posture I'm talking about. Doesn't mean we got it all right, but our heart is turned towards Him. We're after. And that's where we have to be teachable. We have to go, okay, I didn't get it. And we don't take offense because somebody says something to us. And I could share stories about how the Lord has corrected me. Shared some with Christine this past week, and they've been humbling. He really has to hit me over the head sometimes. Maybe that isn't for everybody but me, yeah. But we're all snowflakes. And He knows what's going to take to get me to respond. So I cannot say enough, our relationship with the Lord can only be maintained in our prayer closet. That's where true intimacy is not only birthed, but it matures into what I call bridal love, which is the selfless love. It's no longer the low life, the selfish, me, I, what can I get out of it, which is what most are going into the church looking for. How can I get my needs met? And that isn't necessarily a horrible thing. At some point, though, we should be maturing, because we do have needs, and we do need healing, we do need help. There's nothing wrong with that. But at some point, we should be growing and maturing so that we can start. What you've deposited into me, I can deposit outward. So I started seeking the Lord, and I'm going to share more about this later. I started really asking Him, show me what the differences were between meekness and humbleness. And the difference is, humbleness is when we humble ourselves before the Lord. Meekness is when we humble ourselves in what I call our horizontal relationships, our external relationships with one another. Whether it's our family, people in the church, it doesn't matter. People in the shops, petrol station. Every person we interact, I can trust you. The eyes who are flames of fire are watching our every action. Every action. How do we respond? Just because we think someone isn't watching us, trust me, He is. He is. Everything. So humbleness, it's more easier to be humble, what I call the vertical relationship with our Father and our bridegroom King in Yeshua. It's easy to be humbler with Him. One, so many people have so many wounds from man, and when we go to one another, and I can only speak from experience, sometimes it can blow up in your face. It can be really painful. And you never want to go talk to another person again because you've been too wounded. And so, but that can't be an excuse for us not to still do it though. But we have to understand that meekness is the external. They are both under the umbrella of humility. And so when I was preparing for this message, I knew the Lord had told me what He wanted to talk about. He gave me some ideas of where to go and look at some former teachings I did. But I started going, wait, Lord, are we talking about meekness or humility for this message? Because he'll just give me the broad strokes until I start getting, so when I was preparing, so I stopped everything, and he just spoke real quickly for me on May 13th when I was trying to work on the word for this message, and he said, if we never become humble before him, we will never become meek before man.
Wow. True.
That's right.
Oh,
He's always right.
yes.
So I said, okay, we're talking about humility and meekness, Lord. Thank you for clarifying that for me. I need all the help I can get. So it is a true word. It absolutely is right. I love the Lord. When he speaks, it's truth. And you just go, yeah, you're right. Thank you. Because I was going, am I doing meekness or humility?
Yeah.
So I go, okay. Because he had also given me some things I was to share in my walk this message.
Yeah.
So that's why I was questioning that. I go, am I doing which one, Lord? So he's a good captain of my salvation, good leader. He directs me. So, there's nothing really fun or pleasant about learning to be humble and meek.
So true.
It's often painful, embarrassing, it's humiliating, and it sometimes can feel degrading.
Yeah.
Depending the depth of levels of our sin, our pride.
That's right.
You know, your flesh will die to the cross many times if you're willing to go through the process. But there is nothing fun about it.
No.
I've been going through it for years.
I know. Just
And but praise God. Praise God. I hate my pride. I don't want it.
Yeah. It gets in the way. Yeah.
And so I started to share a bit earlier. Years ago, I asked the Lord to teach me the difference between being humble and meek. Because as I said earlier, I didn't really know the difference. But I just knew both were mentioned in the Word, but I didn't know how they differed. But I believed that they both had to be important to him. And that was why I started going, Lord, so I said, Lord, teach me. Tell me, show me, what is the difference between humbleness and meekness? I don't understand. And I will tell you this, that I knew the very first time I asked the Lord that, I knew somehow it was going to be a painful lesson. I just knew it. But it didn't stop me. And trust me, guess what? It was really painful. Probably one of the most painful situations I've ever gone through my entire life. And so I'm going to share on some of that. It was probably in the fall of 2010, and going through some difficult things on the home front with my husband, and the Lord, in one of my times, came to me and gave me a word, and he's really gracious. He doesn't often forewarn us when we're going to go through a hard time.
No.
He's done it few times for me. And he's always and so I've gotten to learn when he says difficult, I now can judge difficult by his standards, not man.
Yeah.
And when he says not going to be easy for you, I go, okay, at least it's not difficult. But then I go, oh, but Lord, does it mean it might still be as difficult? Because now I've hopefully matured some, so now that difficult is now not easy. I'm like, Lord, that's how it's how I am with him. He knows it. I go, okay, it's all good. But he forewarned me. So he gives me this word, and he tells me that it was about 3 months before my husband died. And I didn't know my husband was going to die. And he had forewarned me, and he said that a difficult time was coming for me, and I'm encouraging you to choose love. It will be hard for you, but I'm encouraging you to choose love. It will be your choice. It's why people, if they get to spend time with me or know me, will often hear me say, it's your choice.
Yeah.
We're the ones that we can go as deep in God as we want. He's not going to limit us. We'll be the ones that stop us by our choices we make. He's not a respecter of persons. We all can be the bride. We can all be the overcomer. We can all sit next to him on his throne. But not everybody will qualify. We're the ones that will disqualify ourselves by our choices. He's always looking to qualify us. So, this really bothered me. Because my walk as a believer, and when I was 34, was a painful experience of coming back to the Lord, I'll say. And from the beginning of that time, I've always chosen love. I've always chosen to forgive those who should love me the most. Not saying it's been easy, I'm not saying I got it right, but I've gone through a lot of heartache, and my choice has always been, even the most painful times, oh Lord, I feel like I'm going to die. I can't take this rejection. I'm going to die from it. And then He just gave me the grace, and I always go, okay, Lord, I know You would never do anything to hurt me. Somehow I always saw the eternal purpose in it by the grace of God, because I didn't understand the things I understand today in a better understanding than I did then. But at that point in my life, I've been walking, dying for years in that process without being able to articulate it to anybody. And so when He said that, that really terrified me, because I thought, dear Jesus, if You're telling me it's going to be hard to choose love, that's been always my choice. I'm not an angry person. I'm not a bitter person. I can get my snits in my pants, and I quickly get over them. And I'm not saying I don't have things I have to work, but I thought, Lord, and I'm thinking, at first I thought this had to do with my husband. I thought, oh Lord, what have we not walked through that could possibly be coming? Because I'm thinking, we've been through so much. And then I thought, oh no, don't ask that. Those are the wrong questions to ask, because then you're going to find out what's coming. So I immediately purposed to go on a 3-day fast. It wasn't a long fast, but I just said, Lord, if You're saying this to me and You're encouraging me to choose love, He's a gentleman. He'll never tell us what to do. But He said, it's going to be difficult for you, and I'm encouraging you to choose love. I had no idea what was around the corner, but I just knew I needed to fast. And so I said, I wanted to fast purely, I was asking, my fast was purely for grace, strength, and the wisdom to be obedient to what He was telling me to do, which was to choose love. Because I just knew somehow my obedience was going to be a key to overcoming whatever was coming. So before I even started the fast, the Lord said to me, yes, I'm giving you what you have asked for. There's more coming, meaning more difficulty, didn't mean more. He said, there's more coming, and what you have asked for is wise. It pleases me to give you my grace, strength, and wisdom to get you through what is coming. I will give you this. Do not take your eyes off me and go by what I tell you, not by what you see. I've never had that happen where the Lord has answered a fast at the beginning of a fast. To this day. To this day. This is how much He loves all of us. And even to forewarn me. That was the grace of God, just to forewarn me. So I've shared some of this on and on, but that was the toughest 3-day fast I've ever been on to this day, ever. 40 days, 21 days fast, 7 days fast, 1 day fast, it doesn't matter. To this day, it is a benchmark of the toughest fast, emotionally, spiritually, physically. I can't really say financially, but every way. From the very moment I started the fast, the demons came to kill me. It was just, by the end of the 3-day fast, I was just barely holding on. I mean, and physically, I'd wake up in the middle of the night starving, and I would never, normally wouldn't when I'm sleeping.
Yeah, that's true.
It was only 3 days, but it was just like you just think you gotta eat something or you're gonna die.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm talking extreme. I'm not just, and it's just like, and then I had the whole emotional side with my husband, just the real difficult things we were walking through. And so, at the end of that fast, I'm not going to take the time today to share all of that, but the Lord was showing me, I really thought I had failed Him at the end of the fast. Because it had to do, I thought my key, I thought Peter and I, my husband, were walking through some difficult things. And I just needed to keep my mouth shut. And I pretty much did for the most part. And the Lord was showing me it would be by my actions to my husband and not by my words. And I didn't say anything mean or unkind, and it was truth what I said, that the minute the fast ended, I went and I said the one thing And I just thought, why did I even fast? Because the whole point, remember, I was fasting in my mind was so that I would have the grace, the strength, and the wisdom to obey, thinking my obedience is going to be the key to overcoming whatever the Lord's asking me to do. And now I just didn't obey. So I felt like I completely failed the Lord. And I went spiraling down really quickly after that. And so the next morning, I remember I was just broken. I was working full time. My lunch hour, I'd go in my car, just get the Lord, cry. That night, went home, got my husband's dinner, went to the room, just broken. And I was repenting about just how worthless our ways are doing things. How worthless our finite thinking is, how worthless our wisdom is, because I'm thinking, in my own strength, I went and I said something. Remember, meekness, strength under control. I didn't have that word yet. It was in the process of being put in me, and it's still a work in progress. But I was just broken. And I remember I wept, and then my repentance no longer came about me. I started repenting for all of mankind, all of humanity, how worthless our wisdom is, our strength, our own human strength is, our intellect is. Tears and boogers all over the place. I mean, I was just a mess on the floor. I mean, it was just, until I had nothing left. I was just so sorry. I was just broken to pieces over feeling just how, when we do anything in our own strength, it's absolutely worthless to Him. Worthless. And it's why, some people they don't understand me, but it's because of my experiences with the Lord, and I can speak boldly on them because He's let me feel them. And so you have that experience, and it changes you. I didn't know what the Lord was saying. At this point, I think I failed. Yeah. I'm done. I crawl on the floor to my little prayer spot, and I just sit there all just spent, feeling sorry for myself, thinking I'm done. I have no hope to hold on. I'm barely holding on to you, Lord. And as soon as I was sitting there for a few minutes, the Holy Spirit spoke and said, "You didn't fail. You didn't fail. I don't know if he said, because I didn't write this part down. You didn't fail, but you passed." So I'm listening, and then the Lord started speaking to me what He was doing. And even though I was fasting for my immediate need, to get through the immediate circumstances, I'm thinking, whatever I'm coming up to, Lord, I need the grace, the strength, the wisdom, so I can just obey and choose love, because it's going to be hard. Yeah. And so He wanted to enlarge my spirit on the kingdom. Not just to get me through my little circumstances, but He knew what I needed to go on to fulfill my destiny. It's why the fast was so hard. And in that process, when He came, and I didn't write this part down, and so forgive me, Lord, I'm not trying to not share things accurately, but I pray this prayer probably every day too. He started speaking to me about the well of helplessness. And He said, you didn't fail. He says, oh, that's what the Holy Spirit says. You didn't fail, you got it. That was it. I go, I got it. I'm like, I got the depth of how worthless our ways are. Now, I didn't see that coming. And that's why, and so it's like when you're in the depths of despair, how the Lord can turn your mourning into joy in a split second. It's just like, I got it? And it was like, and then He said what He was, and He spoke to me again, and He said, for what you're called to do. And this would apply to any believer. It's not just me. And I know the Lord wanted me to share these things in this message. What you're called to do. If you rely on your own human strength in any way, you will not be able to do what I'm asking you to do. He said, so come to my well of helplessness and drink from me often. And that well of helplessness for me becomes, Lord, every day I sit at your well of helplessness and fill me with your courage, with your strength, with your grace, with your humility, with your meekness, with your love, with your forgiveness. I go through the whole list. Fill me with you. And he wants all of us to come drink at that well, and that well of helplessness. I'm only even now, years later, really appreciating the beauty of the revelation he gave me to call the well of helplessness. Because it's really in our helplessness is when we can be used to him.
That's true.
Strength under control. And so, powerful, powerful lesson he gave me. Early. Painful. But that wasn't the end of it, though. That was just the beginning. So, it was just the beginning. So that was my 3-day fast in the fall. I didn't know. So I shared that because he wanted to do a kingdom work in me, and he wanted it to be a lasting work. You know, he was shifting me from the temporal way of thinking to the eternal in that fast. It was something being deposited into my spirit man on that level. And how much of us need to shift from the temporal in this fallen world, right? Only revelation with God is going to make that shift happen. You can read your Bible till you're blue in the face, but if you're not getting revelation, you're going to stay stagnant. And we have such a serious shift that needs to take place to the eternal, to the supernatural. We're not called to live this mundane. This is not the abundant life yet. So he taught me the difference of meekness and humbleness by allowing me to go through some really difficult times with other believers who were close to me. The very day my husband died, within minutes. The other situation was probably maybe a few weeks, if I remember correctly. But primarily, he allowed me to go through it and how they treated me. The words they had spoken about my husband that were cruel and unjust the day he died, to my face. The very ones that were nearest to me at that time, and the only ones I reached out when I got news that my husband died. I didn't call my immediate family. I didn't know what I was contending for at that point. But I just know, my husband just died. I know the Lord was speaking to me about him, me, other things prior, just that morning actually. I had 3 different words, one for myself, one regarding Peter, one for my dad. And so I reached out to the group that I was fellowshipping with at that time that walked in the prophetic, and they came, and I thought to encourage, I needed support. I've never been through this. So when he says a difficult time, I've never had a fiery trial like that since. Nothing to me seems like a fiery trial after what I went through. And so, went through some really difficult things. Some people said to me that day, and Peter did nothing. He thought I was crazy, but he could at least understand my spirituality because he had his own encounter with the Lord open heavens. And so, he didn't really want anything to do with where I was walking, but he always embraced whoever came into the house. He showed these people nothing but love. He's the nicest, funniest guy. Whatever our difficulties, Peter, kind, funny, not a mean person at all. He'd go out of his way to help anybody off the street. And so they really judged my life harshly. And they weren't the closest friends in my life, but they were the ones I thought that I would be most spiritually supportive. Spiritually supportive. And so it was really, and I was so in the spirit at that point that the wound didn't hit me yet. I think my praying in tongues accelerated that day. And I just prayed and prayed and prayed and prayed. And the Holy Spirit gave a word, and I spoke the word, and that's when the words got spoken. Something got revealed. Only the Lord can know. I didn't know what was going to happen to me, and I said, Holy Spirit says if there's any unbelief, then you need to leave. There's no judgment, and in love. So they took offense. I'm just obeying the Lord. I'm so broken. I'm completely undone, just weeping and wailing, and just, I only said one sentence in English about my husband, and that was the one they latched on to. And they thought they judged my marriage. We didn't have, by the world standards of the churches, we didn't have an ideal marriage. My husband wasn't faithful to me. I chose to forgive. I believe in restoration. I believe in keeping covenant till death you part. That's my choice. That's been my walk. That's why I say I've chosen to love those who should love us most. I've been in this process now. My husband and I have been separated 9 years before the Lord merged our lives back together. Now we were living together again. It wasn't a complete restoration. We were still walking through some very difficult things. And so I'm very cautious what I shared about my husband too, just because he already had his issues. He doesn't need people judging him. He already lives with enough shame and self-hatred. So they didn't even know my details. But one woman thought that my husband's dismissed was God's divine justice for me. Those was the words. And it didn't hit me at that time. It couldn't have. I was oblivious to life at that point. And so through that, then I had someone else, and then some other things came up. So then I ended up someone else close to me, believers, and they didn't agree with what I was standing for. And that's fine. So they chose, instead of just, which I would have really appreciated, because I really try to be transparent with people. I try to respect people's boundaries. I try to say, would you be willing, or would you consider? I try not to tell people what to do. I can be guilty of that every now and then. I don't mean to. As soon as it comes out of my mouth, I go, wish I hadn't done that. And this one was a little bit more sneaky to me. Their way of letting me know they thought I was crazy was to give me a book. And in the context of the book, it's like, oh yeah, it made me feel hopeful. Oh yeah, I think this will really encourage you. And you can see what God says. Oh, okay. And when I read it, my heart just sank. And I thought, Lord, I would have really appreciated. Wasn't that just a coward thing to do?
Yeah.
Could they have not just said, you know what? Would you be willing? I have a book, and share something else. Would you be willing to take a look at it instead of kind of like sneak it in? That's how I felt at the time.
Yeah.
And that was someone very close to me too. So these have potential to fester, become very big wounds. And so it wasn't until, and when your husband dies, anybody in your family, but especially a mate, I would say a wife or a husband, if I ever needed an encouraging word in my life and people to stand with me, it was at that time. And that was hard. That was hard. Also on that day, some other woman came to my house in the afternoon, precious sister. And I'm just still in my room praying in the Spirit. Another precious sister came to sit with me. And she grabbed my hand and she just said, the presence of God in this house is so strong, I'm shaking. Praise God. God's moving in death. And she said she wasn't sure if she was supposed to come see me. Because the person who took offense, who said the harsh words to my husband, I didn't say anything bad. I just said what the Holy Spirit said. Went out of their way to call them, to tell them about my husband, but they said, oh no, don't go see her. It was telling out people to stay away from me, on top of it. So, it was like, it's all good. I couldn't appreciate the pain at that point. You're just too numb. So it's when the things start to clear, that's when the wounds have the potential to become really deadly to our souls if we're not going to respond God's way. And most people don't respond God's way. So I was just broken beyond pieces. And it wasn't until about a couple months later, I'm working through this with the Lord, because He said, I'm encouraging you to choose love. Well, now I'm getting it. The difficult time was my husband's death. It was indirectly related to him. I thought at the time it meant something Peter and I were personally going to go through together. I mean, we did in a way. But in the choose love was he to choose to love these people that my flesh wanted nothing to do with. Just being honest. And so I'm working through it because I'm a big believer. Like, I know the Lord has worked this into me from the very beginning of my walk with my husband and I when we were separated. Love is a choice. It's not a feeling and it's not an emotion. It's an action. And so is forgiveness. And if you're ever going to sit there and wait till you think you feel good in your heart to love or to forgive, you're never going to happen. Behind every righteous choice is the power of God to perform it. So I would say, just make the choice. Remember, the Lord said, I'm encouraging you to choose love.
Yeah.
Just when we make that, when we just obey, then He's doing both. He gives us the will, and then He does the work in us. But if He can't do it if we're not willing, we're not doing anything. We're just agreeing to the process. And so I thought, okay, Lord. So it wasn't until after about 2 months of that encounters and just working through the Lord. And every now and I take forgiveness and love a step further. I know some people very wounded, and they'll choose to forgive, and they mean it. They're being sincere. And I say, well, for me, forgiveness is an action. You make a step towards that person, physically, who's hurted you, who you've taken offense with. You don't just say, oh, Lord, I forgive them. Okay, if you do, that's fine. He'll honor that. But He really honors it when we remember what meekness is.
Yeah.
Forbearing, gentle, patient with one another. When you make that horizontal step outward, and often when you really didn't do anything wrong. But just staying in relationship, when there's, like I said, nothing in your flesh wants you. So every now and then I would reach out to this woman, I'd make her some muffins. It was a choice. It wasn't a feeling. Trust me. And so every now I would reach out. And I didn't, my flesh didn't want to, but I knew. He told me, choose love. Thank God He told me. He said, Lord, I just go, Lord, I'm choosing love. I choose love. I choose love. So after a couple months of just working through this with the Lord, then I realized He was showing me what the difference is between humbleness and meekness. He let me walk it out, but at the time I didn't realize it. Because what I did in that process, and I thank God for Neville Johnson, because I wouldn't have been that smart, and I'm not smart at all. I heard one of his teachings about do not judge. I think it was do not judge. But also about, maybe it was on his Job teachings, and I really appreciate the Job. But Job went through a lot. If anybody dare says we've suffered like Job, please don't, unless you've lost everything. Don't compare yourselves to Job. But he stated his case, and he didn't, and no more. And so there was a real principle in that, and I thought, okay, it was okay for me to state my case, but I wasn't going to argue with somebody. I wasn't going to hash it over again. I was just going to know. So after I got back from Ireland, after burying my husband, I had a serious thought in my heart with this sister in the Lord. I called her up, let her know. And I wasn't being mean. I'm just transparent. This is relationship. Where it says if you got aught in your heart, you need to go to your brother and sister and talk about it, right? So I'm just doing it, and I know my heart's stinking. I don't want it. I want it gone. And I called her and I said, I really need to talk to you. I said, and she got really defensive with me. So I'm on a 21-day sabbatical and I have to wait. I said, no, it can't wait. I said, I've got aught in my heart, and the word says if you got aught in your heart, you need to go to somebody and talk about it. So we did. And I think I probably ended up writing her a long letter. Express the hurt that I felt of how judged. And even if she might have had a word of my husband, it doesn't mean it was the final word. God is God, and no one knows my transactions between the Lord and my relationship with the Lord. And even so, it's a warning that I took seriously to myself, and to this day I remember it, and I'll share with people. Even if you have a word from the Lord, it may be a true word, but it may not be the final word. God is God, and He can still intervene in situations. And that's why we're not to judge one another. Only God knows the heart, and He knows all those prayers have been going up. So this woman judged my relationship harshly. She didn't walk these past 10 years of me, standing in the gap, praying for my husband, believing, in a God of restoration, and in that process dying. And so it was in that time the Lord showed me that this was the difference without me even realizing it. But I would just state my case. I think with the other person with the book, there's sometimes you just say nothing. You know, your flesh wants to defend so often, but especially when you're hurt.
It
You want to react, and you
Yeah.
want to just you want to just dump on something. That wasn't how I was doing it. It was in love. It was just saying my case. And on the phone, I said, I just got to let you know. I've got this out of my heart. And I really feel you judged my marriage harshly. You, my husband and my marriage. And said, oh, well, I just believe, God told me he was going to remove your husband. I didn't know he was going to die. And I just really, you deserve somebody better than that. Wow. The wounds weren't already deep enough. This was now harder for me. And I said, who are you to decide who's the perfect husband for me? I said, who are you to think that God didn't give me exactly the best husband that I was supposed to have? Because he knows my end. He knows what I'm called to. He knows how I'm going to respond. Now, this is from a soulish standpoint. Their own wounds. So they make decisions based on their wounds. That's why we have to talk about the renewal of the soul. And I remember we hung up the phone, and it wasn't, we talked. It was so hard. Now, keep in mind, my husband's just died in a few weeks. I said, Lord, I feel like the jewels of my heart have just been trampled upon. And the Lord was quick to say, he says, the jewels of my heart were trampled upon. So I try to remember these lessons as painful. One, I want to not ever treat someone the same way I've been treated, that pain. But I also want to learn what the Lord's wanting to do in me. And so I knew through that, I was just to state my case. The other situation, I think there's no point. I'm not saying anything. I thought it was not a nice thing what the other person did with the book. And being so sensitive, you could easily fall out of a relationship over something like that, and especially over a mate. But I just knew that I was to say no more. I said what I had to say to the one woman. I knew the Lord said, choose love. I said, I'm choosing love. Every now and then I would do something. And it just meant, I just knew that my responsibility was to love them no matter what. Meaning I was to stay in relationship with them, not run away and shut them out, as that was what my flesh wanted to do, but instead, love them and bow low. I'll be honest, like I've shared with you, it was very, very hard. It was a choice. And being in your life, it wasn't like something you see once a year. Constantly there. So, remember that, love, forgiveness, it's a choice and it's also an action. So, I'm probably sharing way too much on that. But I wanted to share that. Because his bride will walk in meekness. These are external relationships. How we respond to one another. He's watching our every move. It is what will help qualify us. She cannot come into the Holy of Holies without being clothed in this garment. This garment will not be attractive to your flesh. It will not compliment you. It will tell you everything is okay when everything's not okay. It will not be made of the finest fabric and make you feel comfortable. Instead, it will be rough against your skin. Contrast, it won't be silk. It'll feel more like burlap. It will not be comfortable to wear. But I exhort you, buy the garment at whatever price it may cost. It will be impossible to qualify to be the bride, the overcomer, if not willing to purchase this garment. And Revelation speaks of that 3:18. Purchased from me, gold refined by fire. Purchased from me. So I encourage you to ask him to teach you to be meek, to give you the grace, the courage, the humility, and the obedience. Whatever you need, that you can be conformed to his likeness in all relationships. I can tell you this, it will be painful if you're willing to go through the process. But I promise you it will be worth it. If our relationships with one another are not right, tainted in any way, if we have any ought in our hearts towards one another, he cannot receive our sacrifice of prayer, so deeply affects our prayer life.
It's amazing, actually.
It's why our humility and meekness are critical to us going deeper, because the bride will be a bride of intercession. If you're going to go into the deeper things of God, you're going to be one who knows how to intercede, the heart of God. But if your heart isn't right with man, how can you be right with God? And so, to the degree that we can make amends with people, not everybody is going to want to stay in relationship with us. That's I have to qualify that on that. I've counseled some people with that. I said, your job is to forgive. Your job is to reach out. You can't make someone else forgive you, and you can't make someone else want to stay in that relationship. But our job is to get our heart right.
Yes.
Because Matthew 5:23 and 24 says, therefore, if you're offering your gift at the altar, and there remember that your brother or sister has something against you, leave your gift there in front of the altar. First go and be reconciled to them. Then come and offer your gift. Mark 11:20 says, whenever you stand praying, forgive. If you have anything against anyone, so that your Father who is in heaven will also forgive you your transgressions. Our meekness or lack of it affects our relationships, good or bad. We'll get to decide. And it's important we can be transparent with one another and learn to communicate with each other without offenses and come back into that intimate fellowship with each other. Satan tries so hard to get us to believe lies about one another, assumptions. He wants to keep us divided. That's why I said meekness is a powerful weapon of warfare. If we would just talk with one another. In love, not in judgment. It clears the air. You have all these, humble yourself before your brother, your sister, your family member, whoever it is, your coworker. It can be anybody. It's not related to one type of relationship, but wherever the odd is. And it's amazing how the enemy uses the mind to keep you isolated. And you believe all these lies about somebody. And if you just go talk to them and just say, can I just talk to you? Here's what and you find out, they go, oh no, I never, no, I would never want you to think that. But because of our wounds, we taint things, and the enemy takes advantages of our wounds and our weaknesses, and he wants to keep us divided and keep us isolated. So if we never talk to each other because we've been wounded by what man, it's a sick little vicious cycle. It's really hard to come out of. And it's one reason you'll hear me often say, I'm just transparent. Probably to the point it gets me in trouble. But I'm okay to disagree with people. I can walk away and say, okay, I can agree to disagree. I don't need to be angry. I don't need to take an offense. I don't need to. But also when I need to talk to somebody, I'm not going to cower in fear of man for how they might respond to me. I just go, well, Lord, however they react, as long as I've done it in love and in meekness and kindness, and I've done it, so even if it's a hard thing to talk about, how they respond is between them and God. And I have to let that go. That's not my responsibility. But if we just take that step, it's amazing how walls come tumbling down, and Satan, who wanted to divide, can no longer divide and conquer anymore. If we've just learned to be meek. I can understand why this was so important to the Lord. Humbleness and meekness. They go hand in hand, and they're different relationships. So Isaiah 66:2 says, this one will I look on him who is poor and of a contrite spirit, who trembles at my word. God is attracted to the meek and works his eternal purposes through them. He loves to use the small things to accomplish his great purposes. Being meek causes the favor of the Lord to be upon us. But don't misunderstand God's favor. Mary, Abel, and Noah all were favored. Lot was favored and escaped judgment, but lost most things dear to him. Joseph was favored. He spent 22 years in prison.
Was that? I knew it was a long time, but it was the
if I'm off, but it's around that. I've heard 22 years. I put in my notes 22 plus. I don't know exactly, but remember, they had favor. Abel had favor. He got killed by his brother Cain. Noah had favor. Only 8 were saved. So we don't want to misunderstand what God's favor means. Mary had favor. She carried our Messiah, but just think, for a woman, a young girl at that age to be pregnant, she would be outcast. They would have thought, she was sexually impure. Even more so than today. A lot of other things that would have been heaped upon her. So, God's favor births something new in our lives, and nothing is ever the same again when God's favor comes upon you. It's one way you can get an idea of that. But God's favor means difficulty, hardship, pressures, persecution, pain, trials, and tribulations. Are you ready to sign up? All those prayers you've been saying, Lord, I need your favor. Can't take them back now. It's too late. What does Acts 14:22 say? It is with much hardship and tribulation that we must enter the kingdom of God.
Gosh.
Must enter the kingdom. Much hardship and tribulation. So, most teach in the church that favor means the exact opposite of what I just shared with you to look forward to. They teach being prosperous, having a nice car, a nice house. People, that's called blessing.
It's a blessing.
It's a blessing. So, God's favor in your life means that at some point everything changes and it will never be the same again. God rocks your world and everything gets flipped upside down, and the course of your life changes drastically with one purpose, wanting to qualify you to be his son's bride who will rule and reign with him for all of eternity, all to bring him glory. And in that process, if you go along with it, you'll be in the process of dying to self. He is redeeming and restoring us back to that place of intimate fellowship that Adam and Eve had with him in the garden before the fall, filled with his glory and clothed in his light. That's his plan for those who are willing. So I want to encourage us that what we suffer through, specifically in our relationships, I mean, most of us are in relationship. Most of us have got some difficult relationships. You know, we're blessed if we have a relationship that is a support to us. So I want to encourage us in our relationships, if we do it his way, it's so redemptive. So redemptive, but it's a process again. You know, Matthew 11:29 says, take my yoke upon you, learn of me, for I am gentle, meek, and lowly in heart, humble, and you will find rest for your soul. So if we learn to be and clothe ourselves with meekness and humility, we'll find rest for our souls. Our souls start to get transformed. The more our souls get transformed, the more we become like him. We become like the Prince of Peace. We have rest. There's rest in our obedience.
Yeah, that's right.
Our obedience restores us back to intimacy. So what the Lord taught me, it's actually, he wanted me to share this today, so I'm going to. And I don't think I've ever shared it, maybe just glimpses of it, but it's almost about 3 years ago, what the Lord taught me about humility. When I was in Phoenix doing the home fellowships, the Lord had wanted me to do. And every week I would prepare for the meetings, and it was in the apartment. And the Lord was training me and disciplining me to teach the Word of God on a more disciplined weekly level. So I fast, I pray, I get the Word from the Lord. I would wait at his feet. It was always, Lord, give me the message, or I have nothing to speak. And as I said, I'm not advertising, and it was just more, it started out because I started leading people to the Lord who's going to feed them, and I cared. Well, remember the Lord told me back in 2010, well, if you don't remember, my call in my life is to teach the Word of God. And how he wants to define that, he gets to decide. So I ended up leading people, and I cared about who's going to feed them. So he now wanted me to start walking in that in a more disciplined manner. You know, it's been a progression for me. And so, you know, I'm not going to say good week or bad week because I'm not about numbers, and neither is the Lord. He knows I'll come for one. And he's the reason I'm here today. I come for one. He is my audience of one. And so, and I think a precious sister Lord shared with me recently, she said, Tracy, you need to know that what God considers success, what he told her in Revelation, he said, one heart converted for him, he considers 100% success.
Wow.
That's amazing.
Wow, that is.
So, he was also teaching, so some weeks, you know, the most we would ever have is 5 or 6 people at start. Then it dwindled, and it dwindled down to about the 3 faithful that would come. And that week, I think I only knew 2 people were coming, and I was walking through some challenges with people. And he was letting me feel hard. He's teaching me about being a shepherd. He's, when you have people come, you get to see the different spiritual levels. You get to, so it's all good. It was really hard. It's all, hard in a good way, but your heart gets broken for what his breaks for, if you're pursuing it. And so this week I knew 2 were coming, and one was a man, and I remember saying, I remember I woke up that Shabbat morning and I didn't feel great. I thought, maybe I can cancel. I really didn't want to do the meeting. I said, now I've got to overcome. I said, Lord, I'm sorry. I know that's just my flesh, and I've got to learn to overcome when I don't feel great. And I don't even think I had a word at that point for the meeting that day. And so I knew the 2 were coming, and for some reason I think I said something like, if only the one man came. I said, Lord, I'm not comfortable if it's just the man. I won't do that in the apartment. It's just not wisdom. I won't just still meet with one person in the apartment. I won't be by myself, the man, in that situation that way. So I went to go meet the Lord shortly before 9. I came out of my room, fly out of there. The meetings were at 4 in the afternoon. Because I wrote it down. It was like 12:50 in the afternoon. I run. The Lord told me, he said, do not cancel the meeting and do not be discouraged. Okay. He'd given me the worship songs. I go run to my computer. I'm quickly trying to. I check my email. I get an email from the other one saying they can't come today. I go, oh. I'll tell you, my flesh was like, oh, I got out of it. Oh, I can break the fast. Oh, I can go for a nap today. Great. It was like, that was just how I did react. I'm just being honest. But now the selfless man, and I quickly wrote an email and I said, I'm sorry, I'm not going to be doing the fellowship today. And I felt bad. I said, Lord, I'm sorry. If you want, I go, am I hearing correctly? Because you clearly told me, have the meeting today, do not cancel it, and do not be discouraged. I said, and I was really puzzled. I'm walking back to my kitchen going, I so clearly heard you say that. I go, now I've just canceled the meeting. I go, I'm sorry if I failed you. I said, but I really am not comfortable having the meeting, and I said, but your ways aren't my ways if you want me up. And then he told me, so my process is I go, I have to have a bath, I get ready, I'd sit in the Word, and I get ready. So I did, and then he told me, I want you to just get ready like you normally do. I want you to do the worship songs that I've given you. Just we would worship, then we do the Word. And he said, I want you to do that, and he wanted to come teach me. And so I did the worship, and I started at 4, and I did the worship, and then during that time, the Lord came I just don't want to jump ahead. Good, thank you, Lord, for stopping me. So during that time, the Lord came, and he stood behind me, and he placed upon me a cape. Well, it was like a cape. It was a garment. And it went down to here, my elbows, and it was not very attractive. It was like burlappy brown, this big crease right down the middle here, and it kind of just fastened around my neck. And I remember I just thought it was the most beautiful garment. It was brown, it was drab. It was a little rough. And it was just, I'm not kidding, this crease, like, you wouldn't go out normally in public, you'd want to go iron it. And he came and he put that around me. And I usually would pray with my hands, and he just came. And I just remember thinking, I said, Lord, I love it. It fits me perfectly. I just loved it. I just loved him. And when you're seeing it, it was nothing great to look at. I didn't know what he had done. And so when I finished the worship, the Lord said, I'm here to meet with you. He came to teach me. So I had my notebook, I had my pen, I had my reading glasses. I'm ready. I'm sitting there waiting for the Lord to talk. This is new to me. So as soon as I did, he taught me on humility. And first, before he taught me that, he said, daughter, I am here. I have placed upon you my robe of humility. I will teach you my ways so that you can understand me and know, so you can fulfill your destiny. He said, do not be upset, assume, or take offense for those who have not come. Also believe that was a word for me for today. His word is eternal. I'm not surprised. And I don't have any, but I just thought it was going to be very few. I actually would have been surprised if it was just me and Christine. And so he said, remember my words you share with them, meaning in the teaching. This is your training ground. He says, I thank you for your love for me, that you love what I love and hate what I hate. It is painful to be rejected, to be loved or liked one day and disposed of the next day. This is the heart of man that has not chosen my ways. This is the heart of man whose mind has not been renewed. These painful lessons are for your good to enable you to endure. Although you have tasted and walked through much sorrow, affliction, and rejection, there is a different sorrow that comes when it is only from those who say they love me or know me. Many hearts are only going to grow colder in the days to come. There are few vessels who will yield to the suffering. It is not easy. It cannot be done in one's own strength, and not at all. And not all, actually, very few, are called to be teachers. And I was getting ready for this message. I had forgotten things the Lord told me. I had to go to my journals. This is when I would write things down. I now type them. Still write them, but I type them. I was shocked when I read this. I get this right, but then I read further. But he said, very few are called to be teachers. This astounded me. Because in my mind, I think you need a lot of teachers. Got a lot of messes out here. God help us. But he said, very few are called for the very reasons you have witnessed these past few weeks that has caused you great sorrow. He says, too many teach from their souls. They do not know me and create more problems for those who are earnestly wanting truth. Now that's truth there. And so when I was reading and preparing, I was really going, wow, Lord. You know, I always feel more unworthy anytime I get the privilege to share the Lord. And I honestly, it has to be Him or I'm nothing. But it's like, when I was rereading that again, so he said, keep your eyes on me, stay low and broken before me. Fear not man, but the one who can destroy both the body and the soul. He said, the labors are few and the harvest is ready. We are in a battle for souls. The warfare will be intense, but I will equip my bride with everything she needs to fight this battle with me. All that I have is hers, and she is all mine. Many have been called to be my bride. Very few, sadly, will not be chosen. This brings great sadness to my heart, but great joy to those who have considered me worthy, worth knowing, who have and are willing to pay any price to be one with me. So that's what he spoke. And I'm just in the Spirit with the Lord pretty much that day. I go now into the night. The Lord just kept coming to me and talking to me this day. So I went to go worship, and I'm done. You know, I don't know what to do with what the Lord's done for me. And I was just really in that place of worshiping. I was worshiping, and I went to go wait on the Lord. And then he spoke to me again about the robe of humility. Because I was just thinking about it to him. I was thanking him so much for the garment. I was just telling him, Lord, just thank you. I mean, I could see it. It's just so beautiful. I said, Lord, I never want it. I don't care what anybody thinks, what it looks like. I go, I want to wear it with everything, everywhere I go. And he's like, that's right. I mean, I was meaning it in the natural.
That's what children do.
Yeah, but isn't that just something? He's like,
with shoes.
And so he's like, and I think, well, but that's what he wants us to do. It's not easy. It's a choice. And I've failed many times. Don't get me wrong. This isn't about me because I'm still being perfected too. But I treasured it. I wanted to wear it with everything. I just said it was the most beautiful garment. And so as I was in that process, then he shared, which is really what I want to share about this, to encourage us or to help us to be prepared for our wedding day. He says, very few earn the right, the privilege to wear this robe. There is a high price to be paid for it, and few are willing to pay that price. Many tell me they want my humility, but when I bring circumstances into their lives to allow them to walk in my humility, they do not want it. They want their pride. They do not want to humble themselves before others. They are not willing to be corrected. When someone asks me for humility, it is not automatic. It has to be earned through trials and circumstances. It is the only way to receive it. You have asked me for years to clothe you in layers and layers of my robes of humility and meekness. Today I put my robe of humility around you. You did not really understand what that looked like when you asked me this all this time, but you knew it was necessary. And through the different circumstances in your life, you have earned this robe. Most think it is something I will do for them, that it will automatically happen. But that is not so. They have to choose to walk in humility, and as they prove to be faithful in this, they earn the right to wear the robe. You have paid a high price to wear this robe. You are baffled. You never saw it this way until now. It starts with a heart that asks me for humility, but at that time it is not granted. What is granted is to bring that person through situations that will bring them to the place of being able to wear this robe. They will decide in the choices they make. You are remembering when I came to you over 5 years ago, asking you to come be my bride. When I visited you a week later and gave you the first key, I had told you it was the key of humility, that you must learn to walk in it, or it is impossible to do my works, impossible for you to do what I have called you to do. You have never forgotten that and have been faithful to ask me to help you, to be humble, to be meek, to surrender your will for my will all these years. You are now worthy to wear this robe. This robe will give you the grace you need to overcome. This robe will give you the grace you need to overcome in the past where you felt you had failed, and the grace you need to overcome harder testings to stay humble. So I share that in all humility. It's a very personal word that I have not shared publicly. Maybe my nearest and dearest, bestest ever, but not many. But it's not a word for me. It's just, well, freely he's deposited, freely I give, but it's not automatic. And I don't think most people would think it's earned. In the sense, nothing we can buy except giving more yes. And so I shared that if we don't know these things, hopefully it might help us make different choices in life and embrace and think, okay, Lord, yeah, that's not fun. And it's easier to hang on to our pride. Satan wants us to hang on to our pride. He fell because of pride. So I was actually really, that was seven years ago. So praise the Lord. He has a time when he wants things to be shared. And so God is attracted to the meek, as we were talking about. So we need to, if we want to be prepared, if we want to be the overcomers, if we want to be the bride, if we want to be the Lamb's wife, we need to learn how to put on the right wedding garment. And the right wedding garment, as we're going to find out as we go through these, is learning to become the nature of the Lamb. And so, but it's going to be our choice. James 4:10 says, humble yourselves in the sight of the Lord and he will lift you up. And if we do, in that process, we're dying. As we humble, he lifts us up. Psalms 116:15 says, precious in the sight of the Lord is the death of his saints. Some could take that a natural death. Yeah. Oh, they got to come home. I think it's a little more deeper than that, personally. Yeah. I'll read again. Precious in the sight of the Lord is the death of the saints. So I could say, when we deny ourselves, take up our cross, learn to die to self, that is precious in his sight because he knows we're moving towards the goal. Yeah. To ultimately where he wants us all to be, next to him on his throne. 2 Timothy chapter 2, verses 11 and 12, the first starts out, the hope and the promises there. It says, if we die with him, we'll live with him. Then it gets into the not so good news. Well, then it says, if we suffer with him, then we'll reign with him. That's about the overcomers. Those are the two promises. Yeah. Then he's just a fair and just God. He says, but if you deny, disown, and reject me, I will deny, disown, and reject you. So again, it's our choices. So in closing, and I am closing, John chapter 2, verses 1 through 11, you see Yeshua's first miracle, the wedding at Cana in the Galilee, where he was turning the water into wine. No. In that he was revealing our Father in heaven's eternal purposes. In his very first miracle he ever did in his earthly ministry, the very first thing he did was reveal. He was declaring the end from the beginning. He was taking the water and transforming it into wine. Galilee in the Hebrew means revealing. So he was revealing. And it just happened to be on the third day.
Yes.
And it just happened to be a wedding.
It just happened, yeah. Look, it's just right.
It was, and that's exactly my next statement. Everything Yeshua does is intentional and with eternal purpose.
Yeah.
And he's so incredible that the very first miracle, he wanted to know, here's God's plan, your Father in heaven. And we are in. He was letting us know that this is how it's going to end. For those who are willing to make themselves ready. That transfiguration is going to take place in vessels who made themselves ready. This is the day we are in. The third day. And third day means, what day did he get resurrected? On the third day. What raised him from the dead? Resurrection power. That's the day. We're in the beginning of the third day. That same resurrection power that raised him from the dead, which is the full indwelling of the seven spirits of the Lord, is going to be poured into vessels who have made themselves ready. That company of people that you'll keep hearing me say, who will be the bride, the overcomers. And if we take a closer look at those scriptures, and there are only a few in John, but they're amazing. I was astounded. I love the Lord. I love his word. I love what he reveals to me. And I'm just going to go through 6 things that I noted in there. One, there were 6 stone water pots.
Yes.
6 is the number for what? Amen. Notice they were stone, but not clay. And in that era, they would have had a lot of clay pots.
That's true.
And why stone? Stone was pure. And it could not become unclean. Or clay could become impure. And when the clay pots were impure, they had to smash them and destroy them. They couldn't use them again. So stone was pure. They were also, because it was a part of the Jewish purification process at that time, they were set apart and used for one purpose only, for purification. So we can make a parallel there, our consecration. Be holy as I am holy. These stone water vessels that were used for purification back in that era, that's all they were used for.
Yeah.
That's all they were used for. Just for the purification. Only water was allowed to go in there. The other thing, and I'm making a little bit of an assumption here, but I think I have the Lord's heart in this. So it doesn't say exactly this, but they were all empty.
Yes.
I say that because he said, fill them.
That's right.
They were all empty. And so we can make another parallel. He only chose vessels that were empty. So we can see he's only going to choose vessels in this hour that have died to self, conformed completely to Christ, that Galatians 4:19 speaks about. When they were, notice they were empty. Then he said to them, then it says the word that they were filled what? To the brim. Again, everything's intentional.
I know.
He didn't have to put the word to the brim. Could have just said they were filled up.
Yeah.
They filled them. To the brim. That speaks of the indwelling of the seven spirits. This is the hope that the overcomers have to fight for, to contend for. It's worth dying for. If you're going through hard stuff, hang on. Go through the process. Die. It's worth it. But we got to be empty. You hear me say, if we don't decrease, he can never fill us. Remember the well of helplessness
Yes.
he taught me about. Come and drink at my well of helplessness as often as you need to. Every day I'm there. Lord, fill me. Yeah. And then we see once he filled them, what happened? Transfiguration took place.
Yeah.
The water now became wine. He saved the best wine for last. The bride, the overcomers. That is the answer for the dark days. That's what these meetings are about. To encourage us to go through this process, to be prepared. But if we don't know what the process is, we're never going to be prepared for that wedding day. And notice, he filled only the vessels that were completely empty. They were set apart, pure, no mixture, and he used them to manifest his glory. He was revealing to everyone around him his eternal plan at that wedding.
Yeah.
That's astounding. He was declaring what Isaiah 46 says, declaring the end from the beginning. The very first miracle, he was declaring, this is how it's going to end. Now, of course, they didn't get all that.
No, I know. No, I don't.
But he,
That's strange. That's interesting.
the water pots were used only for water for purification. Nothing else was allowed to contaminate them. Again, he's not going to tolerate any mixture or compromise in his bride. And remember the water glass analogy. I'm going to share it again because I think it's worth sharing, and it's not mine. Bruce Allen, Dr. Bruce Allen, I believe it's Gacy and the Lord is where I read it. So I remember reading this, and I thought, wow, I got to remember that. That's really helpful when you're trying to help teach people. He's coming back for bride without spot or wrinkle. And they just really don't think God would ever ask us to do that. Well, that's what Scripture tells us. But remember the glass of water. Remember, if you've got a glass of water that has just 0.05% human feces in it, just 0.05%, are you going to want to drink it? No. So again, I'll flip it around like I did because this is just how, and I think this is an awesome way to help people understand his high standards. So now the glass the water's pure, but now there's, urine poured in it or feces, and you didn't clean the glass, but you just poured the pure water in it. Are you going to drink it?
No.
Nobody in their right mind really would do that if you have a choice. So we need to remember zero tolerance, zero mixture if you're going to be the bride. It's a process. Philippians 2, 12 and 13, but I believe it's specifically chapter 2, verse 13 says that he's the one that's doing the will and the work in us. Remember, it's all by grace. It's not a striving. Remember, anything we ever do, it's only because he puts it in us to begin with. He gives us the will, and then he gives us the grace to do it. It's a wonderful scripture to remind yourself when you're going through hard times. He's doing it all. He'll first just give you the first desire is, no, I don't want to drink a stinking rotten glass that's got that.
Yeah.
That's a desire. So then you just start walking as he leads. He's so wonderful in that way. And so we can remember 2 Timothy 3:20 and 21. It talks about the different vessels. Some are for ignoble and noble use.
Yeah.
And there's a call to action there. It says that we would be vessels of noble use, profitable and ready for any good work the Master would want to do. And I say in us and through us. And that's a call to cleanse, that we need to cleanse ourselves and separate ourselves from everything that is ignoble, everything that's unclean, everything that's contaminated and corrupt. And again, it requires our response every day. It has to be intentional. If we don't make it intentional, if we're not pursuing it, it won't happen. We'll never possess our full inheritance. We might make it to heaven, but we won't come into the fullness of all that he had for us. So we can see Yeshua in his first miracle. He poured clean water into pure, empty vessels and transformed them with his glory.
Yeah.
That's his plan. He really didn't make it complicated. I mean, when he showed that's his plan. But he can't pour old wine into new wineskins, right?
Yeah,
We know that.
For years. Yeah.
Likewise, he can't fill us with his glory if we're not prepared.
That's right.
Meaning purified, made ready. If he did, it would destroy us.
Yeah.
The glory would kill us because of our contamination, our
Yeah.
sin. So we also have to be willing to let go of our old ways of doing things. He is doing something new. Matthew chapter 9, 17 speaks about the old wine and the new wine. What happens? They burst, they're ruined, destroyed. Revelations 21 says, behold, I sit upon the throne. I make all things new. He wants to make all things new in those who just say yes. He wants to do it to everybody. Sadly, it's so hard to get people to want.
I know.
It breaks my heart. I really care. I'd love to see so many more, It's like I said, preach the word of God. It's just me and Jesus, and we'll have a party. But I know his heart is he wants everyone. And so the Lord is coming back soon. Be encouraged. We are the 11th hour laborers that Matthew 20 talks about it, and specifically verse 6. He saved the best wine for last. That parable is not about how it's all going to be fair in heaven. You know, that I've heard some people teach on, just because of the wages that were paid. The ones that came at dawn, the ones that came at 9 a.m., the ones that came at noon, the ones that came at 3, and the ones that showed up at 5 and only worked an hour, they all not paid the same wage. The ones that showed up at 5 are the 11th hour laborers. We are the 11th hour laborers. We are the last generation. That's what I firmly believe. He saved the best wine for last. I was just encouraging someone during the week, encouraging and saying, be encouraged. It's not by gender. It's not by age group. He's not limiting anybody. If you're just willing. We were born into this time for such a time as this. It is the highest privilege to be a part of this generation. He saw something in every one of us that he said, they've got it. In all of time span, he picked this people group on all nations in the face of the earth and said, this is the best. These are the best I've got. And why? Because the finishers are just as important as all those who labored for decades. And that's what that parable speaks of. The laborers, the missionaries in the mission fields for decades, seeing no fruit, losing their lives. Then here comes the 11th hour laborer. I thank God. We think we go through tough stuff. But it's going to be a short work and a quick work. But just like I've shared before, why? The 11th hour, the finishers, they got paid the same because this work is just as important as all the previous saints that have gone before us, helping prepare for this time. But just when you make a jewelry or ring or setting, if the setting isn't done just right, if it's not finished correctly, you'll lose your precious stone. Lord of the harvest is not interested in losing his harvest. If he doesn't have the right finishers in this hour, it can destroy his harvest. They can be lost. So he said, no, you're all, be encouraged. We need to be encouraged. We need to take great help and encouragement. Great encouragement in that we are the 11th hour laborers. We're the best wine. That's you. If you're willing to die to self, becoming completely empty self so he can fill you with the glory. If we're not willing, I can promise you, and I hardly promise people too many things, but I can promise you on that day, if you choose not to die completely to self, once you come into the knowledge of it and you have an understanding of it, I said, you're going to have great regret on that day when we all have to stand before him. The great regret, seeing your life flash before you, and the choices that you could have made differently. You could have forgiven. You could have stayed in relationship, even though it meant the cost of your pride, the cost of your flesh burning in the fire. But then he'll show you this is all that would have happened if you would have just said yes. Great regret is going to be on that day for many, sadly. And he doesn't want anybody to go through that. And I'm contending for my own in that regard. None of us are there yet, as far as I'm concerned, and we can all behoove ourselves to keep that in mind. But if we choose not to, we're going to miss the greatest move of God that's ever going to take place. And it's about to take place, I believe. In the nations, as the darkness is increasing, the greatest move of God is about to break out. So I don't want to miss it. I'm here because I don't want anybody to miss it. I'm here to share the heart of God on that. But to be encouraged that he saved the best wine for last. And again, we've talked about it's not automatic to attend the wedding supper of the Lamb. Remember the 10 virgins, 5 were not prepared. They wanted the 5 who were to give them some of their oil. And that speaks of relationship. You can't give someone else your relationship. They said, no. You need to go buy your own. Go to the buyers, Revelation 3:16. Buy from me gold refined by fire, your trials, your afflictions. Keep your lamps full now. Because the one thing that those 10 virgins had in common is they all nodded off and they all fell asleep. And when the shout came, only the 5 that had made themselves ready, at least in their slumber, they woke up because they were ready, they went into the wedding feast. And they did not hear those words, "Depart from me, I know you not," which is sadly what the other 5 heard. Those were all believers.
Yeah, the one right?
So if we choose to stay in compromise, mixture, the greasy grace gospel, you'll disqualify yourself from being the bride. We get to decide by the choices we make every day. Will we come out of Babylon and start being a doer of the word and not just a hearer? That James 1:22 speaks about. Are we willing to surrender our will for his? That Matthew 7:21-23 shows us about those believers who said, "But Lord, I did this in your name. I prophesied, I healed, I did this." And they didn't do the Father's will. Didn't end up well for them either. They were believers too. Are we willing to stop trampling upon his grace by justifying our sin, our bad thoughts, our lust, our greed, our jealousy, our pride, our sexual sins? I mean, it goes on. And instead, learn to use his grace, as it was always intended for us to overcome our sin, to be conformed to the image of Christ. In our words, in our thoughts, in our attitudes. Again, you'll hear me say so often, process. No one's there. I'm perfectly flawed. I'm in the process of being perfected. It's about relationship. So back in August in 2010, when the Lord did come to me, and after I went through that really tough year of purification with him, I would consider it accelerated time of him. What he did speak to me, he first asked me, and this the week before he gave me the key, and he said, "Will you come be my bride?" And I said, "Yes, Lord." And I've sown the Spirit with him. It just was like a normal conversation I was having. At that time, he said, "There's a high price. It's costly." I said, "Yes, Lord. I don't care what it costs me. You're worth everything." And then he was silent. I thought he was done. I started to get up off the floor, quickly fell back, said, "Lord, I'm so sorry. I don't need to be anywhere today. If you have anything else to speak to me, please speak." That's when he spoke this word to me. And I thought at first it was a personal rebuke to me. Well, dear Jesus, is this a continuation of my purification process? But what he spoke to me then, he was speaking about his church. And he said, and this is just how it starts. I just hear the voice of the Lord speaking to me. And when he comes in his power and his majesty, it's a little different when he comes as a friend to you. He was letting me feel the authority of his kingship. And the fear of the Lord on me like never before in my life. Probably maybe one other time. And he said how filthy she was. How so few will be his bride, as his bride will be without spot or wrinkle. They think they can mingle the holy with their filth. I am the Holy One who sits in the highest of heavens, and I can only mingle with the pure. So initially, I just sat there stunned, because he's never talked to me that way before. The words were personal. This was now, and it wasn't like that authority, real.
Yeah.
You didn't question that. And I remember I just was stunned. And I really didn't know if I should be on my face repenting or what else. And then he was showing, then he came and then I think I was ready to get up off the floor. It wasn't done. Because I thought, I actually, my flesh wanted him to be done, to be honest. And I thought, okay. And I was like to go see my dad. My mind started going back into the natural. I sat there. That's when I started to get up off the floor. I said, "Oh," I fell back as quick. I said, "Lord, I am so sorry. If you have anything else to speak to me, I don't need to be anywhere. I'll be here all day." And that's when he said, "I want you to teach my people what it means to be pure." So that's when the call of my life came. And I just cried like a baby. Just wept. I said, "Me, little Miss Blackheart, the one you've just been showing me how ugly my sin is for the past year." It was about 9 months, actually, but it was intense. I couldn't see how he could want me. How would I qualify to do that? I got everything to get right. I didn't know in that process of just yielding. It's still a process. So it's why often others hear me say it will cost everything. If you are to become the bride, the Lord has spoken to me. It's often why I have such a strong position of He's not going to settle for any compromise.
No.
It's different when you hear the King of the Kings speak that to you yourself. It changes you on the eternal level. And I've never forgotten that. And so there's much misunderstanding about what God requires and what costing us everything really means. We've talked about that Luke chapter 14, 26 and 27 and 33. What I consider true discipleship is that we really are lacking true discipleship in the church. So if you're not familiar with Luke 14, verses 26, 27, I encourage you to read them. I encourage them to become alive and living, if they're not already in your life.
Say that again, Luke 14.
Luke 14, chapter 14, verses 26, 27, 33. It's what the Lord qualifies and defines as discipleship. If you do not hate your father, your mother,
Just together.
yeah, your husband, your brothers, your sisters, your own unlife unto death, you cannot be my disciple. If you do not deny yourself, take up your cross, and follow me, you cannot be my disciple. If you're not willing to forsake everything, you cannot. There's no, you might. He's black and white in that. He sets the standard. And so, we will all have to give an account on that day for every word and thought, how we chose to live our life with the one life He gave us to become love. I encourage us now while we have time. That's good news too. We're all going through stuff. I want to be always sympathetic and empathetic. I'm aware of that. I always want to encourage people, don't judge other people's hearts. You know, too easily we judge one another. And we fall out of relationships for whatever reasons, for that reason, but not to judge. No one knows the heart of man except God. Unless the Lord chooses to reveal that to somebody, if that's what you can do. But I encourage us to deal with our issues now, while there's still time to do something about it. Because we can fall from grace. Once saved, always saved is a false doctrine from the pit of hell. I'll never apologize for saying that. I say it in love. I say it as I hope to jolt the lukewarm church out of the slumber we're in. It's one big reason we've fallen asleep. We think we can't fall from grace. We need to study the scriptures. It's not what they teach. But that isn't today's message. But it's one I'll throw in there every now and then, just to remind us. If we're to be ready for our wedding day, to qualify to be the bride, the overcomers, we need to learn how to put on the garment of humility and meekness. To want to purchase this garment, no matter what the cost, it is a key and will prepare us for the dark days if we respond this way, and especially when our flesh does not want to heal. That's the hardest. That's what qualifies us. It's when we deny our flesh, when we deny our evil impulses, when we deny our desires, our wants, our selfishness, our hurts. We put someone else above our hearts, which is not easy. It's a process. He knows it, but He knows best, because He wants to remember, like the water pots. He wants us to be pure and empty so He can fill us and use us for His glory, for Him to be glorified. Revelations, which is interesting, the lamb is the nature of the, He's known as the lamb or the lion, right? The Lord, I mean, they're not the only way He's known, but Revelations, 28 times it mentions the lamb. It only mentions the lion of Judah once. It mentions the lion 4 times. I went to go look this up just in case I thought, but the other lions referred to one time as the living creatures. They had a face like.
Oh, yeah.
One refers to the beast, and another one is when the angels shouted with the roar of a lion. But His character was only referred to once as a lion. That was by accident either. He was clothed in the nature of a lamb. And so, remember, the empty water pots were simple in design in those days. No, they weren't fancy. They weren't nothing great to look at. They were modest. They served their function, and they did it without compromise. And because of it, they could be used to display His glory. Only those vessels who have become like the water pots, set apart, pure, no compromise, empty of self, who live the crucified life, will be filled to the brim with the 7 spirits of the Lord. He will entrust them to rule over the nations with a rod of iron during the millennium reign because they have clothed themselves in the nature of the Lamb. In word, thought, and deed, utterly humble and meek before God and before man. That's true kingdom authority, clothed in humility and meekness. It walks completely clothed in both of them. It's not about self, but it's all about His will being done and the needs of others above our own. You know, what does Matthew 6:33 say? It says, but first seek the kingdom of God and His righteousness, and all these things will be given unto you. He knows we need clothes. He knows we need shelter. But when we start pursuing the eternal things, not the temporal, not this earth, we're too temporal. We're chasing after the temporal, and we're missing out on the eternal, and we're missing out on the kingdom of God being first formed within us so it can be displayed through us all around us for His glory. So I just want to encourage you, this is the last thing I'm going to say, and then we're breaking. If you feel like you're in the fiery furnace of affliction, which is what I call it, I just want to encourage you, just keep embracing those trials. Don't get discouraged in them. See the hope in them. See the transfiguration that He wants to do, the transformation He wants to do, and the emptying of self, the dying. You know, this earth is our training ground, training us to rule and reign with Him. He wants to qualify each and every one of us to be the overcomer. You know that Revelation 3:21 speaks about, He who overcomes I will grant to sit beside me as I myself overcame and sat beside my Father on His throne. He's only looking to qualify us, but it's through our circumstances. So if we're not seeing the spiritual side of things and getting caught up in the temporal in our situations, we're going to miss it. We're going to miss it. So on that note, I say amen. That's the close of this message. We'll keep building on this, and we will be talking about the renewal of the mind, because we got to know, how do we get clothed? What does that look like us on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah, that's right.
What does that look like in our real life
That's the
situations that we
practical
walk
end.
through?
It's
It's great, you can say all these things,
Yeah, that's right.
but the Word of God is alive and living. So,
Thank you.
amen.
Yes, thank you.
Oh, good. So, well,
There's not many here.
it's okay. Praise the Lord.
Praise the Lord.